the warning system we have in our body is anxiety, the feeling state of being overwhelmed or worried, or the feeling state of fear in the body is warning you that there's danger. You might not necessarily know what the danger is, though, because it's all, again, behind that veil. So the question you were asking was about how hypnotherapy helped me. And the same way it helps pretty much everybody else is that by moving beyond that veil into the subconscious, you can find what it is that hurt you and what your subconscious mind is trying to protect you from. Your subconscious mind is for you. It may not seem like that sometimes, but the main task of your subconscious mind is your safety, your protection, your survival, which may not necessarily mean your happiness or your success,
Mhm.
but wants you alive and safe and protected. And it's using that past hurt and pain to armor yourself and protect you from present day
This
situations,
is
circumstances,
Unconditioning,
events.
Discovering the Voice Within, with Whitney Ann Jenkins. Hello, and welcome to the 95th episode of Unconditioning, Discovering the Voice Within, where I bring on guests and we talk about the inner authentic voice and the challenges and the rewards that come from following it. This episode, I have with me Craig Meriwether. Craig is a certified clinical hypnotherapist, medical hypnosis specialist, neuro-linguistic programming specialist, and founder of Arizona Integrative Hypnotherapy, helping people eliminate the negative emotions and limiting beliefs that may be keeping them from reaching their full potential. For over 12 years, Craig has been helping people heal from early childhood trauma, helping cancer patients with pain control, veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder, students with test anxiety, children with nightmares, entrepreneurs with confidence, athletes with peak performance, and anyone who may be dealing with overwhelm, fear, and anxiety. I really appreciated this conversation with Craig, where he was very eloquent in the way he was able to describe hypnotherapy and how it does help us get to the root of the things that are keeping us and holding us back from being in alignment with our authentic selves, and in turn, able to hear our inner voice more clearly. So here is my conversation with Craig Meriwether. Enjoy.
Now I'm ready.
So, my podcast is about following the inner authentic voice, or intuition, or whatever you would like to call that. And I feel like with your profession and what you do in guiding people, there were a lot of things that you had to go through yourself in order to get to a place where you can be a leader in helping people access certain places in their lives.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
one of the
Yeah.
first things that I like to ask my guests is, when is the first time that you realized that you had this inner voice of your own that you were able to recognize?
That's a really great question. In terms of my own journey through this life, uh, it really my growth period, I guess, in terms of what you're talking about, that voice, that higher self, if you will, really started to get awakened during my teenage years because I was struggling a lot with depression and anxiety, and that's a real um, awareness booster when you don't feel that great, and you see other people who are, and
Mm.
and it's that questioning of, well, does everybody feel like I do, or am I the oddball out? And everybody's masking it, or is just you just put a smile on. But there are people I knew, and this is back in the 1980s when I was a teenager going to high school, and as you moved into the 1990s, I recognized people that had a genuine sense of joy and happiness that seemed to elude me. And so that kind of inner voice was there telling me to get better, but I didn't know how. And so it was a frustrating period of a lot of just trying to find every book I could find. This by 1990s, there's still no internet. I mean, at least that us regular people can access. And, so it was a lot of books, or
Yeah.
maybe a workshop that came to town, or a speaker or something, an interview on TV. But it was kind of the birth of my son in the year 2001 that that voice really got strong and said, okay, you got to do it now. If not for yourself, then, at least for your son, because sometimes you'll step up for somebody else when you can't or won't step up for yourself. And by 2001, the internet's out there. So there's a lot more information you can access and a lot more information going on about anxiety and depression because those SSRI drugs, Prozac and things like that, had come out in the mid to late 90s. So there's a lot more information, a lot more discussion about it, a lot more openness about it. And it was really just finding techniques and different tools and different strategies. Because what's insidious about depression, it's not just like one thing. It's like not like diabetes where it's like, okay, that's pretty much the same thing in every person. This is a few good ways of dealing with it. Depression can be anything from like a thyroid problem to side effects of medication, including antidepressant medication, strangely enough, to a head injury, to thyroid problem, to, a debilitating illness, let alone grief or,
Right.
dealing with trauma or something like that. So everything from a physical to a mental to an emotional aspect, spiritual aspect to depression. So it's not like you just point to and said, oh, this is what you need to do because that's what everybody needs to do. It's different. It can be different for so many different people. And so I started just experimenting with the different tools and techniques I could find, the different strategies, and eventually just kind of discovered that I'd worked it out for myself. We had moved to a different town. My son was born in 2001. We moved to a different town, starting new lives, new careers, and all that kind of stuff. So it was kind of an on and off
Yeah.
process, trial and error. But there was one Saturday morning I remember I woke up and I was like, I hadn't felt that heaviness in a really long time. It was sort of like the reverse frog in the pot of water. And I got better without kind of really realizing it, but because I had been practicing and doing the techniques. It's sort of like if you're working out, going to the gym or doing CrossFit or whatever, martial arts or something, and then also one day it's like, oh yeah, I am in shape because you'd
Yeah.
been doing the work, you'd been eating right, and that's what happened to me. One of the big things that kept popping up for me was hypnotherapy. And I'd read books and I'd read articles and there's blog posts at that point and interviews you could watch on TV or very slightly, or at least audio interviews on the internet. And they would sometimes give like bullet points, like the five best things you can do for your life to change your life. And four would be different, but there's the constant was always hypnotherapy. So these people who I admired and like respected and read their books and went to their workshops and took their advice to heart were consistently talking about hypnotherapy as a way to heal those that inner hurt and pain, even if you didn't know what it was, because a lot of that stuff's stored within the subconscious mind behind that veil. And I think that's where a lot of people, including myself, got stuck in talk therapy because really you're just using the conscious mind, that analytical, logical part of mind, to try to figure out what's wrong with yourself, or at least have somebody else, by telling your story, figure you out and tell you what's wrong with you and what you can do about it.
Yeah.
But if so much of that stuff is behind the veil in the unconscious part of mind, how could you ever really engage in the healing of that if you don't know what it is? And what's powerful about therapeutic hypnosis is that by relaxing the mind and body and quieting down that conscious level of mind, you can access that subconscious and
Yeah.
create extraordinary healing. And so, making a long story short, there's kind of came a period of life where I was able to, kind of pivot and do a 180 in my life around midlife. Instead of buying the sports car, I guess I decided I wanted to kind of switch my life, switch my careers and things, and was able to go to a great Academy of Hypnotherapy Academy of America, and got great training and education. I've been working with people ever since.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So, would you mind if we went back a little bit
Sure.
to like when you were a teenager and the environment that you were growing up with? Because I feel like the subconscious is a lot to do with the environment when we grow up and our surroundings and what we absorb through our family or where we live. So, did you grow up in Arizona as well?
No, born and raised in San Diego, California.
Okay.
And and this is born in 67, so I grew up in San Diego during the late 60s, 70s, and most of the 1980s. And it was in the 90s, moved to Santa Cruz, California to go to UC Santa Cruz and just kind of hung out there. It was a beautiful town, beautiful redwoods, beautiful ocean right there by San Francisco. It's just a fun town to visit. But with the birth of my son in 2000, we uh, Santa Cruz is so expensive. California in the late 90s, early 2000s, especially Silicon Valley,
Yeah.
where Apple was going big and was really creating the .com thing as the internet was being launched in the late 90s. And everything got super expensive really, really quick and sort of priced us out within just a couple of years. Even though we were doing great, I was working at the university in the library. My wife was running a spa with massage and manicures and all sorts of things. And we just like, we can't afford to live here, even though we're doing well, we're doing great, right? And we enjoy this, but we wanted to move to a smaller town, a beautiful town, hopefully somewhere close to nature, if not within nature. And we wanted to be close to San Diego because that's where my parents live, and my wife Christina's her parents live. And so we it kind of came down to Tucson or Flagstaff. We picked Flagstaff because it's beautiful. Sedona's right here, the Grand Canyon's right here.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you found tools to help you
Mhm.
sort of address your depression.
Yep.
Was there something that led you to finding those tools?
It was just the constant search for what people do and what people recommend. And whatever book I could get my hands on, whether it's a more personal growth kind of book or a more spiritual kind of book, does meditation work? Does jogging work? Does, changing your diet work? Does, um, taking supplements, 5-HTP or theanine or, whatever people were recommending, it was like I was willing to try. And again, whether it was some sort of guided visualization technique or listening to a recording or making sure you go out and stand in the sunlight for 5 minutes a day or whatever, I was willing to try it and willing to do. And it's that thing it's different for everybody. Everybody, in terms of their healing journey, needs something different. Certainly, somebody with a broken leg is not going to go to an expert in, heart surgery. And so it's like people who are hurting may need different tools and techniques and strategies for their healing. And so I can't, say, this is what everybody needs to do, 1, 2, 3, 4. There are some obvious things, like especially around diet and exercise, and even maybe trying to find a way to steady the mind and calm the mind, whatever that means to you, whether it's yoga or meditation or guided visualization or whatever that may seem to you, intentional prayer, something like that. But um, after those kind of more generalized, of course, you need to take care of body, just like you need to make sure there's enough air in your tires in your car and change the oil and all that. In terms of what's causing the hurt and pain is going to be unique to each person. And that's what, again, going back to hypnotherapy, what I found extraordinary for me is the hypnotherapist. So when I work with somebody, I'm not going to fix anybody. And hypnotherapy in and of itself isn't going to fix anybody. You fix yourself. And as Dr. Irving Kirsch calls hypnotherapy a non-deceptive placebo, because we know we can heal ourselves. That literally every pharmaceutical company that's doing research, let's say on a high blood pressure medication, they have to trick half the people into healing themselves because they know they can and they know they will. And so, in terms of the language when discussing the medication to the volunteers who are volunteering for this trial, and the literature they're handing out and the way the medication is handed out may actually influence them healing themselves. So they need to account for that. So they have the one group with the sugar pill to see how many people heal themselves. Let's say 30% heal themselves in the getting the placebo, literally mind healing the body, and 40% get better in the getting the real medication. They have to subtract 30% because maybe the way they set up the trial and using influential language caused them to heal themselves as well,
Mhm.
even though they were taking the real medication. So really only 10% got better on the medication, that's good enough. They'll put it on, the market at $80 a pill. But what's extraordinary is like nobody really looks at, yeah, but more people got better through healing themselves.
Yeah.
More people heal themselves. And so with hypnotherapy, we're not here to trick you into healing yourself. You're going to do it on purpose. Because who better to know what the problem is than you, and who better to know what to do about it than you? And so in terms of my journey, all these techniques and strategies, certainly hypnotherapy is part of it, but it's also, maintaining, just like, if somebody wants to lose a lot of weight and they get to their ideal weight, there's still work to be done. They still have to, go to the gym and exercise and eat right and all that. So there's a certain relentlessness. Even once you reach your health goals physically, there's a certain relentlessness. You have to, keep on keeping on in terms of strengthening, reinforcing, and maintaining that physical health through the rest of your life. And we know this. That's not a surprise to anybody, I don't think. But the same, I think, is the same for your emotional health and your mental health. There's a certain relentlessness to this. So even though you do the deeper healing work, say with a technique like hypnotherapy or something else, there's still something you need to do, whether again it's the meditation or the yoga or the exercise or the intentional prayer or whatever it is that works for you.
Yeah. How has hypnotherapy helped you in your own life?
What's fascinating about hypnotherapy is that even if you don't know what the problem is, you can access the problem because you know within the unconscious part of mind what the problem is. Because if somebody's struggling with, let's say, anxiety, it's it's pretty extraordinary what the body has to do to create the state of anxiety and the fight or flight response. And the brain has to start creating adrenaline and cortisol. And maybe you've heard the crazy stories, Whitney, of the like grandmothers lifting cars off of babies. I mean, that's adrenaline doing that. And now your brain's flooding your bloodstream with adrenaline and cortisol. 300% more blood moving to the big muscles of your arms to fight, 300% more blood moving to the big muscles of your legs to escape. It's got to come from somewhere. So the power of your immune system is start to shut down. The power of your digestive system. No need to fight the common cold or the flu or whatever, because that's tomorrow's problem. That's next week's problem. You're in danger right now. You no need to digest that sandwich so you have energy in 7 hours. You're in danger right now, and so it'll turn down the power in a lot of these important operational systems within the body to fight the threat right now. So there's a lot of effort that goes into turning on that stress response, so you know why you're doing it. It's not random. It's just not happening willy-nilly. There's a threat that your subconscious mind perceives in your external environment, but it may just be imaginary. It doesn't have to necessarily be a real threat. And that's frustrating because just like having a nightmare in the middle of the night, doesn't matter how strange or crazy or weird your nightmare is. A cheeseburger's chasing you on the street throwing coconuts at you. It's dumb, it's stupid, it's never going to happen. But your mind, even in deep sleep, uh, you know, sees a threat. And again, will turn on that stress response, go through the effort, even deep sleep, turn on the stress response to protect you from the cheeseburger. So you can imagine what's happening in your waking world. It doesn't necessarily have to be a true threat to your safety, but only a perceived threat. And what it's using is the hurt and pain you've experienced through your life, maybe even since you were a little kid. So it sort of has this filing cabinet. Your subconscious mind has a filing cabinet with all these different files of all the hurt and the pain and the trauma and the fears and the terror and the anger and the humiliation that you've been through life. And if anything that's coming in through your five senses, what you're seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, smelling in the moment, as all that information is being filtered through, if anything triggers one of those files, you'll get the warning signal. But instead of like somebody pulling the fire alarm in a building and getting the sirens and the strobe lights warning everybody to get to safety, the warning system we have in our body is anxiety, the feeling state of being overwhelmed or worried, or the feeling state of fear in the body is warning you that there's danger. You might not necessarily know what the danger is, though, because it's all, again, behind that veil. So the question you were asking was about how hypnotherapy helped me. And the same way it helps pretty much everybody else is that by moving beyond that veil into the subconscious, you can find what it is that hurt you and what your subconscious mind is trying to protect you from. Your subconscious mind is for you. It may not seem like that sometimes, but the main task of your subconscious mind is your safety, your protection, your survival, which may not necessarily mean your happiness or your success,
Mhm.
but wants you alive and safe and protected. And it's using that past hurt and pain to armor yourself and protect you from present day situations, circumstances, and events. So, in terms of how it helped me, it's by moving in and sometimes just asking what is causing the anxiety you feel in your chest or the back of your head or your abdomen or wherever you're feeling the anxiety or the fear or the anger. What is causing that? Sometimes it's just as simple to ask. And the subconscious, in like, let's go back to the first time you ever felt that. Maybe do some sort of regression work. It's like, okay, when I was 5 years old, this happened. Okay. Well, we were concentrating on what happened when you were 16 or 22. But really, the core event, the root event of this anxiety you're experiencing was way back when you were 5 years old. And so that's where the healing needs to happen. And so that's what, the work we did with myself is the hurt and pain you pick up of not just, through your life, but that origin event, that kind of core event needs to be resolved. And again, the big part of some of the other therapies, like talk therapies, you may not know what that core event is because it did
Mhm.
happen when you were 5. And not a whole lot of people really, just because of the way memory works, remembers way back when, unless it was something pretty extraordinary. So what's great about hypnotherapy and why and how it helped me was by being able to go back finding those core issues that were causing the depression and the anxiety in my life and resolve it.
Yeah. What is the process like if you would be working with someone on these issues to try to find the core thing? Is it something that can happen in one session, or does it have like a multiple sort of timeline?
Yeah, it kind of depends. Generally, what I tell people is 3 to 4 sessions. And mainly why I say that is so people get the idea that this is going to take 80 to 90 sessions over 2 years, like maybe talk therapy might. So yeah, there are some sessions that it just kind of depends on what people need to work on and how much work they've done so far, and um, and all that. But generally, I like to tell people 3 to 4, just to make sure that not only is the healing accomplished, but the deeper healing has been uh, what needed to be deeply healed has been resolved, and then strengthen and reinforce all the positive things that you now need to fill yourself with. And so, yeah, I've worked with people. Like, here's a great example: fear of flying. That's one of the things hypnotherapy helps people with. I worked with somebody with fear of flying 1 session, and that was it. Another person I worked with for 5 sessions, and that's what it took. Why did this one person only take 1 session? Why did this other person take 5 sessions for the exact same thing, fear of flying? I don't know. So people take the time they need to heal, but pretty much what I can tell you is typically I don't work with people more than 5, 6, 7 times. There are cases where people just love the work. It's like, let's do more work. And there's one person I was working with for a really long time. It was just like every 6 weeks, let's do something. And we just kind of, when we got to the session, it's like, what do you want to work on? Well, how about this? And just as the person enjoyed the work so much. I may work with somebody 2 times, and then a year later they come back and say, okay, now I want to work on this entirely different issue. They worked on some hurt and pain, and now they want to work on confidence, giving the keynote speech at the big conference. And so, in terms of what people need to work on, it's really hard to tell somebody how much time it's going to take them to heal, even with broken legs and things like that. Well, is it going to be 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 7 weeks before you get the cast off? It's really about your intention, what it is you want to heal, and even some barriers you might put up
Mhm.
to healing that, because it's scary. It can be, but what I like about hypnotherapy is we can do this in a very safe and gentle way. And so one good example of this and do a real world example is some years ago, I was doing classes for the cancer support community of Arizona. And this is right around the COVID era of 2020. And so these are Zoom classes. In fact, most of my sessions nowadays are Zoom, and it works really well. Just like, we're doing here. We're on a Zoom call and we're talking. And just as I could ask you to just in that chair you're sitting, relax and close your eyes, and we can do a hypnotherapy session just like this. But I was doing these classes, and during COVID era, of course, the cancer support community is going to shut down live classes because everybody has compromised immune system. So we're doing Zoom stuff. And you get 12, 15 people for this series of classes I would do multiple times a year, like for pain control and healing acceleration and immune system boosting and things like this. And one of the series of classes, uh, there's a older woman. I'm guessing she's probably in her 70s, and we come to this. She came to this hour-long class, and because there's 12, 15 people, it's not like a back and forth, tell me your issues kind of class. It's like, okay, in today class we're going to work on pain control. So I want everybody to close their eyes, take a deep breath in, and I facilitate the class. On the third class, I'm setting up the Zoom room. I'm there waiting for people to show up. She was there a little bit early, and we're just chit-chatting about the weather and life and how things are going. And she asked me if hypnotherapy works with procrastination. I say, yeah, it works well with procrastination. That's a defense mechanism. Certainly if you know, you're down in Phoenix, Tucson area, the desert of Arizona, literally you could be out in nature walking on a trail and there's a rattlesnake there. You want to move away from the rattlesnake. That's a great way to keep yourself safe. A fight in the street, you want to keep yourself, a bear coming at you in the forest, you want to get away from that. So, but when it becomes unresourceful is when that deadline for the project or the report you turn in for the class so you can graduate, and you're procrastinating because there's something that feels dangerous and unsafe about it, fear of failure, fear of success, something else maybe, and so you postpone it and put it off, and that becomes very unresourceful way of trying to keep yourself safe. So anyway, the hypnotherapy works well with procrastination, and we set up an appointment for the very next day because I had an afternoon appointment. And what's interesting about this work is once you kind of understand that you're going to be doing some deep healing work, the gears start turning in your subconscious mind, and it goes, well, yeah, we can work on a problem, but why not work on the problem? And so when she got to the session just 24 hours later, Zoom session, she says, I told you I want to work on procrastination, but what I really want to work on is why I don't matter in life. And this is a 70-year-old woman who feels that she's worthless and has nothing to offer and she doesn't matter. And that's a feeling state in the body, just like anxiety is, or fear, or anger. And you can point to it. And that feeling state is created by brain chemistry. And that brain chemistry that gets changed in your brain can only happen, at least in the way we're talking about, through a thought or a memory, even if it's unconscious. And so there's a direct connection between the feeling state and the memory and or thought that's creating it to change the brain chemistry, you get that feeling state. So we're going to do some regression work. So in the session we're doing, we get to a point where I count from 10 down to 1, and I want her to go back to the very first time she ever felt being worthless. And 10 down to 1, and on 1, I ask her, where are you? And she says, I'm standing up in my crib, and my father's screaming at me because I won't stop crying. And so if this is, I'm guessing she's around 70, that would make this the late 1950s, early 1960s. Maybe men are not exactly taught how to be nurturing fathers to young children like that. Or maybe dad's not the greatest person in the world, or he's having a bad day, a bad life, a bad week. And mom's out of the house and baby's crying. And he doesn't know what to do. And in his frustration and just rage about life or whatever's happening, he thinks the only thing he can do is scream louder than baby and tell the baby to shut up. And so standing up your crib is what, like 12 months, 14 months old, something. And in that instant, that child being screamed at by this person who is supposed to love her and nurture her and protect her, that's got to be terrifying. And through the trauma of that experience of being screamed at, decided that, well, the only way to justify and explain the situation is I must not matter in life. And that she's not worthy of love, attention, or whatever. And she held on to that for some 70 years until one day she decided it was time to change that. Now, in and of itself, that healing happened within that one session. It was a
Yeah.
long session, but we did a lot of healing work, and I never saw her again. I connected with her over the course of a year, just checking up, and she was wonderful. She was living her great best life. But in terms of the healing, it happened in that one session, but there was a setup to it. She had done 3 generalized hypnotherapy classes on pain control, some stuff that had nothing to do with what her pain was about, her internal pain. So there was some setup to her healing, but in terms of the healing, it happened, her deep healing happened within that one session.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow. Like, and to be that age and still be like seeking answers and not just giving up, that's incredible too.
Yeah.
In a class like that, like on Zoom, where you can see multiple people at a time,
Yeah.
that's really interesting, especially as you were describing the feeling in the body, because I like emotions get stored in our body.
Mhm.
So are you able to actually like see that being released from people in a group like that?
Not so much in a group. In a group like that, and that was the early days of just figuring out how to do Zoom classes. Because I had no intention of doing Zoom stuff. I was just doing one-on-one sessions with people, and I was doing live classes at the office that opened up in Flagstaff, and that's how I was associated with them. And I think March 2020, they just start, okay, we're shutting down everything because everybody that comes to our classes has a compromised immune system. So we're going to Zoom. And I didn't want to be that guy to say, well, I don't do Zoom classes. And so in the beginning, it was, trying to figure out how to do hypnotherapy Zoom classes with 12, 15 people. And a lot of people would turn their cameras off and
Yeah.
things because it's just like, lying back and relaxing and a guided visualization kind of thing. It wasn't like each person, and now, Sarah, I'm going to talk with you and your subconscious mind. It was more of a generalized, just like a yoga class.
Gotcha.
You might be able to hit, in a class of 20 people, you might be able to focus on one person who's struggling a little bit, but you can't go to every person in a 20-person yoga class and help them specifically. So same with this kind of class, or maybe even sort of a meditation class. But in terms of what you were just saying, when you're working one-on-one, or maybe you have a small group of 2 or 3 people, 4 people, yeah, you can see people change. I mean, tears fall. I mean, that's the body releasing, and whether it's shaking or it's crying or it's just, the big deep sighs. Um, yeah, people can oftentimes have a physical response to the letting go and the releasing work, as well as just the emotional work as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Would you be able to describe the difference between perhaps a guided meditation and hypnosis?
Oh, no. Yeah, there's a real gray line as to what is therapeutic hypnosis, what is guided visualization, what is a guided meditation, what is neuro-linguistic programming. It's all very similar and very related to each other. And in terms of, I guess I would say, if just for me, a guided visualization would indicate that it's a very generalized kind of modality to just make you feel better or maybe gain confidence or something. And so it's something you might have on a recording that everybody hears the same guided visualization. Whereas with hypnotherapy, it's very much a specific healing that person needs to go through. You may use aspects of guided visualization, neurolinguistic programming, even the meditative state to help with that. I just say guided visualization is probably one of the tools that hypnotherapy uses to help with somebody's healing amongst all those others. And so, yeah, it gets really kind of a fine line between how do you define this and how do you define that. And if you get 10 hypnotherapists in a room, they may all just describe it as a little bit different. just due to their own training and experience. But certainly guided visualization is a big aspect, one of the tools and techniques that hypnotherapy uses. It's just there are other tools as well. You know. And so, but it's like, in a sense, if let's say you're at a yoga class and everybody's favorite part of a yoga class is savasana at the end,
Yeah.
and you're lying back, you get on your back, and the yoga instructor, she's saying, okay, lay your arms to the side and relax your legs, relax your back, and take a deep breath in and exhale out, and just pretend that a golden white light of spirit is coming down from the edges of the universe and it surrounds you like you're in a cozy, warm blanket, like you're from the top of your head to the tips of your toes, you're in a warm, friendly cocoon of this amazing healing energy. And you breathe it in through the bottom of your feet and it moves up your legs and into your abdomen, into your heart. Surround your heart, expand your heart with love and compassion. Again, she's doing hypnotherapy, right?
Uh,
She's using guided visualization to create a, a an emotional, mental, and potentially physical change within your body. And so, in and of itself, like if your yoga instructor is doing savasana and actually doing a guided visualization, you could point to that and say, yeah, actually, what she's doing is hypnotherapy.
yeah.
You know,
So
so it's a kind of a weird, it's like a
seeing that
all
is more
encompassing.
specifics, more specific. That is like putting it into your brain to be specifics seems like a hypnotherapy. Well,
Yeah.
uh, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and there's all else aspects. So it's just like, of course, there's the deep healing work you want to do if you're struggling with some trauma or some hurt or pain. Even if you're not even sure what it's about, your subconscious mind knows because it's holding on to it to try to protect you. So it knows what it's dealing with. But there's also the other aspects. Okay, well, once you remove all the hurt and pain, what do you want to fill yourself up with? Nature
Mm,
abhors a vacuum, as they say in science class. So you want love, you want joy, you want happiness, you want confidence, you want abundance. What do you want? And we can fill you up with that.
mm,
Or, somebody, again, there's like a fear of flying situation, or oh, I've never spoken at a conference before and I got to do the keynote at this conference coming up in a couple months. I really want confidence. Okay, we can work on that. Or an athlete wants, I worked with an athlete once where she was, it was gymnastics, and she tumbled wrong and hurt herself. And now that she was healed, she was nervous about doing that specific routine again or so. So it's like, it's not really traumatic hurt and pain from childhood. It's just like last month, while on the mats or shooting baskets or playing tennis or whatever, I hurt myself doing this move, and now my confidence about doing that move is not there anymore. Can I get that back? People taking tests. And it might start in college. They did great in high school. I work with somebody who was getting her master's degree, and that's when the test anxiety started because she had been the top student in high school. She'd been the top student getting her bachelor's. But then when she went to graduate school, it was filled with kids who were, top of the class. So it was filled with one percenters. And she wasn't at the top anymore. And so
yeah.
she wanted to maintain that. And so the stress and the anxiety of trying to maintain a level of superiority at graduate school amongst a sea of students who were extraordinary in terms of academics led her to a lot of anxiety, which was linked to taking tests and handing in reports on time and extra studying and not getting enough sleep. And she, kind of linked that with not only tests, but then other aspects of business and career and life. And so it does not everything has to have a early childhood connection, certainly. Oftentimes it does when dealing with deep trauma. But in terms of something like the person I just described about the test anxiety, that could start in your 20s or 30s or somewhere else. Yeah.
Mm. So if someone would like to work with you, like what does that process look like and where can we send them to find you?
Yeah, the generally what happens is people get to a point, we were talking about that voice earlier. That voice starts tapping you on the shoulder, whispering in your ear, just like that the woman. I made the example I gave. It's like For whatever reason, she saw the classes announced in an email, newsletter or something, a flyer or something, and says, that sounds interesting. I'll go to those classes. And then it resonated with her to the point where she asked, can you help me with this? And we had a discussion and then we set up an appointment. And that's generally how it happens. Someone gets to the point where they can't do it anymore without deep healing. And for whatever reason, they read about it in a book. Their friend told them about it. They read an article. It just it popped into their head because they saw it on TV a long time ago. So I think talk therapy is not helping me. The exercising and food is somewhat helpful, but I still have this anxiety. I heard hypnotherapy helps. I'm gonna find somebody, and they generally call or email, and we set up a time to talk over the phone. Is this a good match? And here's how it can help you. And then if it's a good match, you want to move forward, we'll set up an appointment. Generally, I personally work like midweek and on weekends and evenings because I know people work during the week. So I work Saturday and Sundays and evenings and things, and we'll set up a time to work, and I'll send them an intake form that they fill out online. And this could be a Zoom session. I live in Flagstaff. You happen to be in Flagstaff, have people drive up from Phoenix to do sessions in person, and they have a nice weekend in Flagstaff. Or we could just do it over Zoom in the comfort of your home where you feel relaxed and safe. And it works really well. But I'll send an intake form you fill out online, and some people write 7, 8 really detailed paragraphs about what they want to work on. Other people may just write one word, anxiety. But you know what that means, even if it's just one word, anger, anxiety. I'm just feeling just overwhelmed and I want to deal with it. And that's it. You know what that means. You know what the word overwhelm means. You know what the word anxiety means to you. And so that's what we work on. And then we come to the session generally, uh, the first session may be just a releasing and letting go of all that heaviness you may have been carrying for a long, long time. And kind of like a deep cleansing, but it just kind of depends on what people are working on. Somebody I was working with a couple of days ago, we spent half the session just going over exercises. Here's a technique you can use to reset your nervous system. Let me show you this technique. And we go over that, and that we spent about half the session doing that. Generally, the first session's about 90 minutes. And that may seem like a long time when maybe like a talk therapy session's 50 minutes. But the reason it's 90 is that I want to make sure there's enough time to do any deep healing work that needs to happen in that first session and not run out of time. Because generally you want to talk a little bit at the beginning just to make sure we're on the same path, and any questions I may have, any questions they may have. And I don't want that time to disrupt the healing work. Like, well, it's time to, go. I'm sorry, you're halfway through the healing. We'll have to pick it up some other time. No, I want to make sure there's enough time. Let's get it all we need to get done in that first session. So the first session is generally about 90 minutes. And I tell you, it seems like it's 10 minutes. It goes really fast. And so if, the name of my office is Arizona Integrative Hypnotherapy. And I've been partnering with my wife, Christina, who opened up Northern Arizona Massage and Wellness, a clinic here in town. And so I kind of been partnering with her. So you'll either see me with Arizona Integrative Hypnotherapy or Northern Arizona Massage and Wellness. But if I live in Flagstaff. If you were just to uh, Google search Flagstaff hypnosis, you'd find me.
Okay.
It's a real
Yeah.
easy way to remember how to do it.
I can also put the links to your practice in the show notes so people can click on them easily if they would like to work with you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Is there anything on the top of your mind or heart that we haven't got to yet?
I think it's been a great conversation, Whitney, and I would just tell people, just off the top of my head, to leave them with something. I say, what you practice, you get better at. What is strongest within your mind is what you do over and over again. And so, of course, we know that if someone's playing piano or learning the violin or uh, learning dance or martial arts or a foreign language, what you practice, you get better at. But what if you're practicing anxiety? What if you're practicing anger? What if you're practicing being overwhelmed or in fear? you're literally going to wire that into your brain, which will reset your nervous system and change your behaviors and your actions and how you just interact with the world. And even though a lot of that practice, just like learning to walk or some other things, is somewhat unconscious and automatic, so is the practice of anxiety and fear. But the more you practice, the better you get at it. The stronger the connections in your brain are, the neural pathways. But with neuroplasticity, we know we can change the brain. We know that can be healed. So there's kind of two parts to this work. There's the deep healing work we do in hypnotherapy sessions. Like the example I gave of the woman in her 70s who felt worthless. There's the deep healing work that happens in a session like that. But the part two of this work is that relentlessness of, well, if you want more joy in life, you want more happiness, you want more compassion, you want more gratitude, you can have it, but there's practice involved in that. Just like your physical health, you just don't get to go to a personal trainer once and then work out at the gym twice and you're in shape for the next 50 years. There's a relentlessness to your physical health every day. You got to watch what you're eating, what you're drinking, exercising in some sort of way, even if it's just a walk around the block. But the same goes for our mental health and our emotional health. And I think that gets lost sometimes because we think we should just be happy.
Right.
And it
Yeah.
frustrates us that maybe that we're not. Well, you can be happy, but like your physical health, it does take practice. The Dalai Lama still meditates every day. The man's like 90, 91, 92 years old at this point. And, read his books. The Dalai Lama talks about the anger and the despair and the sorrow he has about what's going on in Tibet and the rest of the world. But he doesn't want that to be who he is. So every day he practices loving kindness and compassion. That's his work. That's what he does. And you think of anybody in the world, if anybody was to have it down by now, you think it'd be that guy. He's not married, he doesn't have kids, and he's got a staff of people to meet his every need and want. And granted, he has great responsibility, but he doesn't have a lot of the life challenges that us quote unquote regular people do who aren't the Dalai Lamas or the popes or the whoever's. And so if you see him and you say, oh, that guy's still practicing every day, meditating, doing his meditation work, what does that mean for me? It's like, so what do you need to be doing for your spiritual work, your emotional work, and your mental health work, and your physical work? And it's a lot. My list. If like I was to write it out, it's like, okay, well, I want to get up and do my meditation and quick do yoga, and I need to exercise, and then I want to do some reading, and I want to write in my journal, and then I want to do my spiritual work. And I mean, I got like 6 hours of stuff to do before I go to work, and it's not going to happen. It's just not. So it's finding those in between times. If you have 5 minutes here and 5 minutes there, do a little bit of, whatever technique works for you. Again, 8 billion people in the world of all sorts of different cultures and people and who've gone through all sorts of different stuff in their lives. It's going to be different. So whatever works best for you, and maybe there's still some trial and error you need to go through to find those things, but that's kind of, I don't know, half the fun of life. Maybe it's just finding those things, and maybe it changes over time as we get older. But long story short, long answer to a short question. Um, practice who you want to be, and you'll become that person. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Great. I have one last question that I ask to wrap up, and sometimes it can be a sentence and sometimes it can go on for a little bit, and either way is fine, and there's no wrong answer. But if your inner voice had a billboard, what would it say to the world?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. Well, it'd probably be a variation on what I just said. You have the ability to be happy. It's just going to take some practice.
Yeah.
And again, it's just like, man, just if you do something a little bit every day, you'll make it. And there may be, I saw this great analogy, and I wish I could remember who did it to give them credit for it, but on Instagram a couple of weeks ago, and the analogy was the guy was saying, here's this glass of water, uh, and I put a teaspoon of dirt into it and stirred around. It doesn't matter how much sugar I put in the water, it's still going to taste awful. And so you have to remove that dirt and that hurt and that pain. It doesn't matter how many positive affirmations you may say to yourself or, you know, any sort of positive work like that, you have to pull the weeds. Otherwise, they're going to choke out those seeds that you're planting. And you can do that. You're allowed to do that. You have the power, you have the ability, you have the right to do that. And you don't have to wait till you're 70. You can do it now.
I
But
feel
you
yeah,
have to
there's
remove that stuff, and then your seeds have the ability to flourish.
yeah, absolutely. And now when we have so much access to information, there's so many different ways and modalities and
Yeah.
offer seek
Yeah.
to get there. So you
Yeah.
just have to
Yeah.
choose.
So that would be my billboard then. Pull the weeds so your seeds can flourish. That's my billboard.
There we go. Well,
Yeah.
that
I'm gonna change it. I'm gonna change my billboard.
excellent. Well, thank you so much for
You're
joining me.
welcome, Whitney. I really appreciate you inviting me onto your show.
Thank you so much for joining me this week. If you're listening and you like what you hear, please consider subscribing and rating this podcast, as it really helps get this podcast out to other people who might be interested in hearing it but don't know about it yet. And also, if you'd like to contact me or reach me, you can reach me at unconditioningpodcast@gmail.com or unconditioningpodcast on Instagram. Thank you so much, and until next time, stay tuned in to you.